This is the book that every beginner trader gets handed. I read it last year, and honestly, a lot of it was over my head. I just finished rereading it, and I want to tell you exactly what showed up in my trading, what I'm still skeptical of, and why I think I'll get even more out of reading the book next year. All right. So, two things I want you to know up front. The first one is that I read this book last year when I was just starting. And honestly, a lot of it was a little too advanced for me. Like, I understood the words intellectually, but I didn't have enough screen time to really understand what they meant. This time I reread it maybe a couple of weeks ago, and it hit differently. And I do think that if I read it again next year, I would get even more out of it. So, two, Andrew Aziz mentions in his book that he trades during the regular session. I trade more during pre-market. So some of what he teaches doesn't really map with my strategy. And I'll kind of talk about that later on. So this review is not a takedown. It's not a hype review, but it's just an honest review from someone who's still in the messy middle of trading. I'm still learning. I'm not consistently profitable yet, so I'm still learning. Okay. Well, the first thing this book reinforced for me hard was the discipline of having a named, defined setup before you trade. He's relentless about this in the book, and he doesn't want you to trade vibes. He wants you to trade real setups, and this was extremely helpful. I'll show you in my trader view. I track all my trades and I flag every single trade with the setup. And once I started flagging each trade in trader view with the setup, I realized that there were times where I didn't have a setup in mind. I was just going on instinct or whatever, gut feeling. He really hammers that home, and that's when I started getting very serious about flagging my trades, and it has helped me a lot. Okay, it's helped me a lot. I think it's reduced the problem of me just getting into a trade because it feels right, and I really don't have a defined entry, exit, stop, and all of that. I stopped doing that, and this book really helped reinforce that. The second thing that really helped me from this book is that he's talks about how a stop loss is non-negotiable. And I trade mostly in pre-market, but I do trade the beginning of the market open. And I wasn't putting a stop loss after I entered my trades. But recently I changed that, especially because of this book. So now I have on my whiteboard, after market open, place a stop loss, okay? Place a stop loss on every single order. And that's definitely a game changer. I had some big losses because I didn't have a stop loss order in place. And that's just crazy. During the pre-market, you can't do that. So it's not really within your control, but after the market opens, it's within your control. You should have a stop loss on every order. And he really hammers that home in his book. Very helpful. And my data was already telling me that that's something I need to do, but he really hammers that home. Like I said, he trades during the market open, and I trade in the pre-market. So there are a lot of setups in the book that weren't immediately relevant to me. I want to explore those setups, but because I'm a beginner, I'm really focusing on a few setups. And so I found that some of the setups didn't relate to me. But for those of you who trade during the market open, this would be very helpful. Okay. All right, so this is the main thing that really didn't land for me as far as the book. It's the title. It says day trading for a living, and it's for beginners. Those two things right there kind of I found a little misleading. Okay, and day trading for a living, it kind of implies you read the book, you do the things in the book, and now you're going to be making a living off of it. Well, he says that it takes a minimum of 6 months to get profitable. Honestly, I think it's less about the months and more about the amount of time that you spend putting in learning. Like at first, I was only trading during the market open for an hour. Now I'm sitting there for 3-4 hours. I'm going back at other times of the day. So the more time you spend in front of the screen, the more experience you're going to have. But I just feel like the title has a slightly misleading expectation. And also saying it's for beginners. I'm not a genius, but I'm also not a moron. And I think it is a little too advanced for a beginner. However, I highly recommend the book. I just think that it's worth rereading. Okay, so yeah, a couple of the setups, again, not super relevant for me. Like, I really struggled to see the ABCD pattern, which I know is so popular, but I just struggled to see it. I don't trade it. There were a lot of setups that were geared for the open of the market that I don't understand yet, like opening range. And there are a lot of things that honestly I wasn't even aware of. So I feel like there's still a lot for me to unpack in this book. And again, this is why I feel like it's not really for beginners, but that's just me. um, and so I will be rereading it again, definitely, for sure. Okay. Now, that leads me to my next point, which is I feel like this book gets better as you get better. So it was helpful to read last year, but a lot of it kind of went over my head. There's like he has charts and things like that, and it's just really hard to get through the technical information as a beginner. Okay. And that got me frustrated. I honestly almost kind of wrote the book off. However, reading it again this year after months of real screen time, real journaling, looking at real data, losing real trades, the same sentences that I read last year, this year they mean something completely different. Okay, the words didn't change, obviously, but I changed. So I will probably reread this again next year. And I'm guessing the same thing will happen. Things that I glossed over this reading will land next year. And I don't think that's really a flaw in the book. I do think that trading books have value by rereading them over time, because as you become more experienced, the information, absolutely, you see it through a different filter with more experience. Okay. Um, but I just want to warn you, if you read this book once and you feel lost, that is not a sign to quit trading. Okay. That is a sign to put in more time watching the screens, watching the charts, paper trading until some of it starts to make sense. Okay. And then I think honestly, with this in this day and age with AI and the internet, one of the things I did was as I was reading the book, when something didn't make complete sense, I'd Google about it, like, what is this? Um, and that would kind of help. But I do think this is a book to revisit over time. So, who would I recommend this book to? Well, I would say this is for people who haven't yet internalized that trading is a skill. If you're somebody that thinks it's a get rich um, quick path, I think that his information about you have to journal, you have to have setups, you have to use stops, I think that's very helpful for those people. Okay. But it's not for somebody looking for an easy, quick read that they can just copy the strategy and start printing money. Okay. That book honestly doesn't exist. And anyone selling you that book is selling you a lie. Okay. Trading is hard, it is risky. It is a skill that you have to develop over time, and it will absolutely test your emotional stability and mental stability. And that's one of the things I like about it. I like that it's hard, okay? It's not for everybody, but we're not everybody, right? We're a little bit different. That's why we're trading. Okay. Let's see. So that's pretty much a wrap for today. Stay tuned. I'm going to be doing way more book reviews in the future. I'm just starting with the books that I've already read. And then I'll branch off into other books that are on my reading list. I have a really long reading list for trading books. on my live stream, a lot of my viewers have been suggesting things. So there's a few that are already on my list. I'm like, oh, I have to get to them. However, I'm going to start with the books that I have already read, or in this case, read twice. And, so stay tuned for that. And I will see you over in my live stream and trade smart.